Good day to doctor. I am Farina binti Baharudin with metric number 285595 and I will talk about the question 1. Question 1. What are the terms and conditions which agree by both parties in respect of the guarantee document? The guarantee document outline the terms for two types of financing, which are the term loan facilities and the credit facilities. I will talk one by one and it have some differences. First, the term loan facilities. For this term loan, the loan amount is 75 million ringgit. Meanwhile, for the interest in this term loan, it will start after 1 month grace period with a minimum of 40,000 ringgit paid monthly during this period. Any unpaid interest is capitalized and accrues further interest. Lastly, for the principal repayment, it is structured into 77 equal monthly installment after the grace period. Then, for the credit facilities, the total loan amount is up to 55.4x million, but it can split F3, which are term loan 1 up to 22.25 million, term loan 2 up to 15.2 million, and revolving credit up to 18 million. The interest for the credit facilities is bank effective cost of fund around 1.75%. Meanwhile, the interest payment is same as the term loan facilities, which are interest payment must be start after 1 month grace period with unpaid interest capitalized and accruing further interest. Lastly, for the principal repayment, we can divide it into two, which are the term loan 1, 60 equal installment after the grace period, and the revolving credit. It will repay within 5 months or on demands. I think that's all from me. My friends will continue with the question 2. Thank you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. In their opposition brief, the defendants raised several significant points, which is they emphasize the need to demonstrate their ability to use basic mathematical concepts in their calculation. In the notice of demand dated March 10, 2017 and the notice of termination dated May 16, 2017, the defendants argued that the plaintiff failed to adequately show the principles, methods of computation, and the effective cost of fund, which is the ECOF rate. Due to this lack of clarity, they claim that the accusation against them were unfounded. The defendants also highlighted that they were not given advance notice of ECOF rate changes. They asserted that these changes were made without the knowledge of or consent, questioning the plaintiff's transparency and fairness regarding the loan terms. Another point discussed was the divisions of responsibility. The defendants contended that the plaintiff should be held accountable for their actions based on other assets they own. They believe that these additional securities should absolve them of any financial liability related to the issue. Lastly, the defendants discussed that the effects of appointing a receiver and manager. Despite the plaintiff having appointed a receiver and manager, the defendants noted that not all of the securities owned had been liquidated. They argued that this situation impacted the total liability and management of the securities involved, and hence the plaintiff could not pursue legal action against them. However, the court found this concern unconvincing. The court stated that plaintiff was not required to provide specific computations or ECOF rates in the notice of demand and termination, as these were sent the borrower, not the defendants. Additionally, the defendants failed to present any substantial evidence to counter the sums claimed by the plaintiff, which led the court to prevent them from disputing these amounts. Consequently, the court granted summary judgment in favor of the plaintiff in sum demanded.
Okay, we go to the third question, which is, does the plaintiff have the right to enforce the guarantee provided by the defendants due to the loan facility being in the default? So the answer is yes, the plaintiff have the right to enforce the guarantee provided by the defendants due to the loan facility being in the default. Based on the case study, we got 5 points that we can point out. The first one is actually default on the loan. The borrower defaulted on both the first facility and the second facility, leading to the plaintiff, which is Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad, to terminate the facilities and the issue demands to the borrower and the guarantor, which is defendant. So, despite these demands, the borrower and defendant fail to dispute the claims or settle the amount. The second one is actually guarantee agreement. The defendant execute joint and several guarantee agreement, clearly stipulating that the guarantor will be liable as the principal debtors. This means the liability was not merely as a sureties, but as a primary party liable for the repayment, regardless of the variation in the loan terms, interest rate, and also any actions by the bank regarding the other security. The third one is conclusive evidence of debt. The loan agreement allow the bank statement of account or certificate of indebtedness to serve as a conclusive evidence of the debt amount, unless manifest error was proven. The defendant failed to show manifest error or provide proof disputing the plaintiff's statement of account. The next one is no valid defenses. The defendant's claims, such as disputing that interest calculation and asserting that other security were not fully realized, where demands are arguable and also not triable issue. The term of the guarantee explicitly allow the bank to enforce the guarantees without first resorting to other securities. The last one is court decision. The High Court concluded that this was a plain and obvious case where summary judgment was appropriate and the defendant failed to disprove their liability or the amount of claim. In summary, the plaintiff has the legal right to enforce the guarantees since the loan facility was in the default and the defendants as a guarantor are liable for the outstanding debt. The court decision affirms these positions.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Fatin Najiha. So I'll be continuing on the question 4. Do the defendants have the right to contact plaintiff when the plaintiff failed to inform the defendants on the changes of rate which they claim that the changes were outside of their knowledge and consent? First, the defendants claim acting as guarantors argued that they were not informed of changes to the effective cost of fund ECOF rate, and these changes were made without their consent, and they claim this lack of communication invalidated their liability. In the court's finding, the court rejected this argument based on the guarantee agreements. First, the agreements allowed the plaintiff to vary the ECOF rate without requiring guarantor's consent or notification. Second, the guarantors had agreed to be principal debtors, meaning their liability was independent of changes to the loan terms. Third, the agreements included a conclusive evidence clause, making the plaintiff's statement of account binding unless the defendants could prove errors, and the defendants provided no such proof. In the defendant's weak defense, the court noted that the defendants did not object to the notices of demand or termination when issued. Their silence was interpreted as acceptance of the claims, and the arguments later raised were unsupported by evidence and deemed unarguable. The key takeaways in this case highlights that courts prioritize the sanctity of contracts. Guarantors must fully understand their obligations and potential consequences of agreements that they sign, and financial institutions are often given the rights to make unilateral changes, and provided these are clearly outlined in the contract. So in conclusion, the court granted a summary judgment to the plaintiff, reinforcing the enforceability of guarantee clauses and the importance of honoring contractual commitments. Thank you.
So now I will proceed to the next question. Explain the type of guarantees for dependent 1 and dependent 2 and their liability as principal debtors. So in this context, the type of guarantees is joint and several guarantees. Dependent 1 and dependent 2 act as guarantors for the loan. A joint and several guarantees means that each guarantor is fully responsible for the entire debt, not just a portion of it. And this gives the bank the flexibility to actually claim the full amount of the outstanding debt from either one or both guarantors, regardless of any internal agreement or liability between them. Secondly, principal debtors, not just sureties. The guarantees clearly specify that dependent 1 and dependent 2 are not merely sureties but principal debtors. This distinction has a significant implication for their liability. And as principal debtors, dependent 1 and dependent 2 are directly obligated to fulfill the debt even if the borrower defaults. Their responsibility is to trade as if they had borrowed a sum of money from the bank themselves. Next, the guarantees are described as continuing and unconditional. This means that they cover all sums related to the loan, including the principal amount, interest, and other charges. The guarantees remain in force until the entire debt is fully repaid, regardless of any changes or adjustment made by the bank to the loan terms. Even if the bank decides to grant concessions or modifies the loan agreement, dependent 1 and dependent 2 obligations as guarantors remain unaffected. And this will ensure that the bank can recover the debt no matter how the loan is managed over time. And finally, the guarantees include a conclusive evidence clause. This strengthens the bank's position by specifying that any statement of account or certificate of indebtedness by the bank serve as final and binding proof of the debt amount. In practical terms, this means that dependent 1 and dependent 2 cannot easily dispute the debt amount. If they wish to challenge it, they must provide clear and undeniable evidence of an error of the bank calculations. And this clause helps to reduce prolonged disputes or over the debt and ensure a quicker enforcement process for the bank, protecting its interests. So to sum up, the joint and several guarantees entered into by dependent 1 and dependent 2 make them principal debtors with direct responsibility for the debt. The continuing and unconditional nature of these guarantees, along with the conclusive evidence clause, provides bank with significant protection, ensuring that the debt can be covered efficiently and without lengthy disputes or argument. So that's all from our group. Thank you very much.